In the 2006 comedy Idiocracy, directed by Mike Judge, we're plunged into a dystopian future that manages to be both hilarious and horrifyingly plausible. The story follows Joe Bowers, played by Luke Wilson, a perfectly average U.S. Army librarian selected for a top secret military hibernation experiment precisely because of his utter mediocrity. Alongside him is Rita, played by Maya Rudolph, a streetwise sex worker caught in the same experimental web. When their hibernation pods are forgotten and they awaken 500 years later, they discover a world that's devolved into an intellectual wasteland where the average IQ has plummeted and vocabulary has been reduced to a mixture of grunts and corporate slogans, and plants are dying because everyone waters them with a sports drink called Brondo. It's got electrolytes. In this brave new world of spectacular stupidity, Joe, a man of thoroughly average intelligence, finds himself suddenly the smartest person alive. He's quickly thrust into a position of responsibility by President Camacho, played by Terry Crews, a former porn star and wrestling champion whose solution to every crisis is loud proclamations and spectacular showmanship, prophetically eerie to present-day political figures. The film posits that the decline in intellectual capacity unfolds not due to a dramatic event or dark plot, but through societal shifts that begin to treat intelligence as a disadvantage rather than a benefit. This theme is reflected in the actions of modern PR firms and social media campaigns that simplify complex issues, demonstrating the early manifestations of this phenomenon. The genius of Idiocracy lies not in its over-the-top humor, but in its understanding of how societies decline, not through dramatic collapse, but through the slow erosion of our capacity to think critically and to question media narratives. What started as satire has become a warning sign. The question isn't whether we're heading towards an idiocracy, it's whether we're already living in its early stages. One hashtag, one manufactured controversy, one dumbed down narrative at a time. Folks, by now you may have heard about the Blake Lively case, where Blake Lively is suing Justin Baldoni, her co-star and director from the movie It Ends With Us, for sexual harassment and for engaging in a campaign to tarnish her reputation. Now, Lively alleges that Baldoni created a hostile work environment and then retaliated against her by orchestrating a smear campaign designed to damage her public image when she raised concerns about his behavior. She states that Baldoni used his influence on the set to orchestrate unnecessary kissing scenes. At one point, he walked in on her while she was topless and refused to look away, and just general male skivvy predatory behavior. As a result, she is citing in her lawsuit damages due to severe emotional distress. In response, Baldoni's legal team has, of course, denied the accusations, labeling them as false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious with an intent to publicly hurt. They argue that these claims are part of Lively's attempts to repair her negative reputation. And folks, once again, we start to see a pattern emerge where a woman accuses a man of something heinous and immediately she is cast as a word that rhymes with witch or something worse. Now, Blake Lively's story offers us a look into the shadowy world of reputation management and how these PR firms are able to shift the narrative and change the tone of public discourse. But here's where it gets interesting. These same PR firms, particularly the one employed by Baldoni, are often linked to other high-profile campaigns against other women. And they all pretty much have the same MO, where they begin seeding stories through so-called anonymous sources and industry insiders. And the timing, just as her brands were gaining traction, is far from coincidental. One moment she's launching a business venture, and the next she's weathering a storm of carefully planted stories about diva behavior and impossible demands. Sounds familiar? Enter Meghan Markle, the poster child for systemic reputation destruction. In her case, the power structure going after her isn't just a jilted individual, but a whole institution, the British monarchy. Remember how it all began? Small criticisms about protocol breaches evolving into full-blown character assassination. And we see the same patterns emerging: coordinated social media campaigns, suspiciously timed leaks, and an endless parade of royal sources. Oh, and did you catch how certain phrases like difficult, demanding, and narcissistic kept appearing across different outlets, almost as if they're following a script? The involvement of specific PR firms, particularly those with connections to wealthy individuals and institutional power structures, reveal a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to transform a woman who dares to challenge the status quo into public enemy number one. Then there's Amber Heard's experience, perhaps the most aggressive deployment of these tactics we've seen. And I know there are people watching this who are saying, oh, it's not the same thing. Amber is a narcissist, blah, blah, blah. Look, let me tell you something. You are simply a victim of the brainwashing tactics employed by these PR firms. I remember during the trial where it was alleged that Depp had accused Amber of sleeping with all these people, which she denied. And it just sounded like she was in an abusive relationship. Then there were accusations of his raging violence, which, by the way, unless you've been living under a rock, has been no secret. I'm old enough to remember allegations of abuse by his then girlfriend, Kate Moss. I remember how he trashed one of many hotel rooms in a drunken rage back in the day. So it didn't really surprise me that he was also abusive to Amber. What did surprise me, though, was how much the public was perfectly okay with ignoring all the past allegations of his terrible treatment of women in order to castigate Amber. Now, I'm not a fan of Amber or Blake or even Meghan for that matter. And look, if I say I'm not a fan of someone, it doesn't mean I don't like them. It just means that I am neutral. But I know a brainwashing hate campaign when I see one. And when the Heard Depp trial was going on, I was shocked to see the intense level of vitriol directed toward this woman. And I'm not saying she's perfect. Who the hell is perfect? Nobody is. But Amber's problem was that she did not have the money or public support behind her to properly fight back. And even though juries are supposed to be sequestered, they are still going to be leaks. And Depp had the money to use the same PR machinery from incidentally the same firm Baldoni used to bury her. And it was sad to see because she literally had no support from the public. With Meghan, at least she has the Sussex squad, but Amber really had very few people in her corner. But hopefully that's going to change because, folks, I really don't care who is pissed off watching this. I'm going to call out BS when I see it. And what's insidious about how these firms operate is the way they use social media as a battlefield where manufactured outrage is masqueraded as grassroots sentiment. Folks, I'm sure many of you are aware of the use of bots. These accounts that just seem to pop up from out of nowhere. Have you noticed how certain narratives seem to appear simultaneously across various platforms using identical language and timing? These firms deploy sophisticated social media strategies, creating hashtags, all in an attempt to appear organic. And they all pretty much use the same methodology. First comes the isolation phase, separating the target from potential allies through strategic leaks and carefully placed stories that make supporting them seem risky. Next is the credibility assassination, flooding the media space with increasingly outrageous claims, each building on the last until the mere mention of their name triggers negative associations. Finally, there's the social media amplification, where armies of accounts, some real, some not, create the illusion of overwhelming public consensus against the target. And the way how these campaigns operate is that they exploit our deepest social instincts. They don't just attack reputations, they transform their targets into modern-day cautionary tales. Each woman becomes a character in a larger narrative about what happens to those who don't know their place. The true genius of these campaigns lie in the diabolical way they make us complicit in their success. Every share, every comment, every reaction feeds an algorithm designed to amplify outrage and suppress nuance. We become unwitting participants in what amounts to digital public shaming. And folks, each case serves as a blueprint. They can use the exact same strategy to get you, the public, to hate whomever they want you to hate. And these PR firms are not just used by wealthy individuals like Depp and Baldoni. They're often employed by politicians to go after political opponents, by governments and established institutions like the British monarchy, who is so intertwined with the press, who happen to be the linchpin of these digital burnings at the stake. Take, for instance, this writer for the New York Post and The Sun, both coincidentally having the same owner, Sarah Nathan, sister of Melissa Nathan, the mastermind behind these PR strategies, who frequently writes negative articles about Meghan. So they're all intertwined, folks. The tactics refined against Meghan were deployed against Amber, and now we're seeing echoes of both in Blake Lively's situation. Each campaign becomes more sophisticated, more difficult to detect, and more effective at bypassing or critical thinking defenses. And folks, it's not just about character assassination. It's about the industrialization of public hatred rooted in misogyny and performed with clinical precision by firms who have turned reputation destruction into a science. And the question isn't how we protect individual reputations, but how we preserve our collective ability to distinguish truth from manufactured outrage in an age where reality itself seems up for grabs. And this isn't just about the dumbing down of the discourse, it's about creating a self-perpetuating cycle of intellectual surrender. Each time we participate in these simplified narratives, we're not just choosing the easy path, we're actively rewiring our brains to prefer it. The dopamine hit of joining in on a pylon, The comfortable warmth of group certainty, the relief of not having to hold complex, sometimes contradictory truths, all becomes addictive. What emerges is a landscape where anti-intellectualism isn't just normalized, it's celebrated, where the ability to reduce complex human beings to villains or heroes isn't seen as a failure of understanding, but as a virtue. In the end, maybe that's what makes these campaigns so devastatingly effective. They don't just destroy reputations, they destroy our ability to think deeply about anything at all.